Okay, well, thank you very much for hosting me. As Jackson said, my background is I'm a chartered accountant. My passion is around actually affordable housing and reducing homelessness, whether that be visible on-street homelessness or hidden homelessness. So everything I talk about today has really been driven by trying to use my skills practically to think around the issue and how might we reduce homelessness, and community self-build I think is part of that solution. So what I've put, the title here is a fast and effective model for community-led housing delivery with land as a form of patient investment. I think a caveat straight away, there is a misnomer there, fast. To date, I've probably spent about 2 years explaining this model to a series of stakeholders across the city. We are getting there slowly. What I mean by fast is once it's proven as a model, then I think it can be rolled out quickly, and actually the land supply can be integrated into other resources, money, human resource, other things, and then actually the system should flow better. So I'll explain a bit about it. I'm not by any means suggesting this is the only model. I'm saying this is one model which might be complementary to others. So here we go. Have I pressed the right one? Jackson, help. How do I? Is it? Oh, yeah.
Is it not moving?
No. What about if I do that? There we go. Okay, great. So Great Western Regional Capital CIC. So I'm here representing a community interest company. It has an asset lock within the west of England. It's a community interest company that's limited by guarantee rather than shares. Our not-for-profit shareholders, if you like, or in other words, our members, include Bristol City Council, include the University of West of England, University of Bristol, Bath Spa University, Business West, the Society of Merchant Venturers, VOSCA, and the John Ponton Trust. So that's quite a diverse group of stakeholders, I'm sure you'll understand. The basic idea is that if you get those stakeholders coming together in a formalised structure, sitting around a board table and focusing on certain issues that society face, whether that be homelessness, whether that be enhancing or promoting the low-carbon economy or employability and skills, you have a better chance of solving some of these intractable issues than if that's done in silo with a local authority on their own, a university in a research bubble, or a business with purely commercial interests. So the idea is it's a civic-led and cross-sectoral organisation that focuses on certain themes, one of which is homes and communities, incorporating housing. The vision, so we're a public benefit investment company that provides civic-led, commercially focused and innovative investments that catalyse change and deliver social value. So the civic-led part, I've mentioned the sort of organisations that sit as members. We, however, will be reactive to community-led projects. In other words, we will not dictate to Lockleys or to Easton or to Bedminster what we think they need. We will be led by those communities coming to us and saying, this is what I think you need. Can you help us with the technical skills, expertise, land, money, whatever it is, influence that's needed to help with that discussion? We're not by any means there yet, but that's the plan. So we're, in a sense, here to help and be led by communities for the need. I've mentioned who we're supported, and as you'll understand with the CIC, it's unique. It recycles all profit. So if we do make profits, it's a long way away yet. Anything that's over and above cost goes back into the system, revolved into the west of England. There are no private shareholders as such. Okay, so now focusing on the actual question in hand about land, what we want to do is to apply a simple and replicable long-term investment model to deliver homes at speed and regenerate communities at scale, if indeed they do need regenerating. I suppose one of the starting points is that to get land cheap or free is quite difficult. It's not to say it can't be done, but I think against the constraints of current austerity, against the constraints of cut local authority budgets, I think a lot of particularly local authorities and other landholders would be looking to maximise their value. So if that's the case, is there a different way of actually making a scheme stack up with affordable housing but at the same time making sure that they meet their best value criteria. And essentially what we're talking about here is full value for land, but over time. In other words, patience. And I'll go a little bit more into detail around how that works. Okay, so the model, the plan is not to reinvent the wheel. There are a lot of very good housing associations. There are a lot of good CLTs. There are a lot of good, people like Ecomotive. There are a lot of good other local developers who know much more about how to deliver housing schemes than we do. So we're not putting ourselves in that place. But what we are saying is we would like to partner with those organisations to deliver the outcome, which is the homes and potentially the employment attached to it. The model we're proposing, as I say, because I think the current economic context is such that it requires this thought, is that there's no capital or revenue subsidy required. So one of my previous jobs was I worked at Housing Association, Knightstone Housing Association, and what we watched gradually is the capital grant subsidy for affordable housing gradually getting cut and cut and cut. So that was part of the journey we went on to come to that conclusion. So the long-term investment for a landholder with a share of the rental rising with inflation and full repayment within 10 years. So very simply put, and this is the kind of crux of the conversation, if there is a piece of land and it is valued before planning permission is granted at, let's say, £1 million, just to pick a number out of the air, that £1 million could, there's a couple of choices. Either the landholder, it could be a local authority, it could be a private landholder, it could be a church, it could be whoever, wants to receive that £1 million. If they sell it for £1 million now, then without capital or revenue grant subsidy, the chance of affordable housing being produced as part of that site, in our view, is very, very slim. Therefore, the difference is we're saying you will get paid your £1 million, but wait, you'll get it in year 10, and in the meantime, treat it a bit like you would investing £1 million of cash and generate a yield, 3, 4, 5%, whatever it may be, such that you're generating revenue. Now, the reason we think that that's an attractive model to statutory bodies is because, as I say, revenue is being cut through austerity. So actually, if there's a way for a strategic landholder to turn essentially what is, using accountancy jargon, an illiquid asset, an asset that's sitting around doing nothing, into something that then is live and generating a revenue stream and housing and jobs, and tax receipts, etc., then that we think is an appealing thing. With private landholders, then, I think the model works to some extent. We think it works better with a semi-permanent solution. In other words, if a lot of land banking is down to private landholders just wanting to sit and hedge their bets on whether their land is going to go up and up and up, is there a short-term solution? It could be container housing, where essentially during a period of 10 years, that private landholder is paid a yield to produce housing, and at the end of the 10 years they still have the option open to sell their land and the container housing is removed. So that's a slightly different nuance on the model. So I've talked about that. Existing sites turned into income generating assets. Social value. So that we've done, being a numbers person, we've done sort of fairly detailed financial modelling on this. We think the model I've explained can sustain about 30% affordable housing. Scale is an issue. It's fair to say. I think the minimum scale that it works on is probably about 40 to 50 homes per scheme. So for smaller schemes, it needs a bit of additional thought. But that's not to say it's not an insurmountable problem. The remaining 70% in the model we've done is for kind of, in inverted commas, the squeeze middle. So the way we're defining the squeeze middle are those who, the current government agenda is obviously around home ownership. There are those who won't necessarily want to have home ownership as their home of choice, and therefore what is a way of producing a rental property with a responsible landlord with 5-year tenancies in the meantime. And that's the enterprise part of the social enterprise that subsidises the affordable housing. And it's a long-term investment, so that's, the whole point of this model is long-termism. I think what Tim said is exactly right about the sort of long-term social value lock in perpetuity, and I think that's this model should seek to achieve that as well. Over what time period, perpetuity is better than shorter, but it depends on investors to some extent sometimes. Just briefly, there's a picture of a model that we've been talking to the council about. I won't bore you with too much technical detail, but essentially you've got on the left-hand side of the page the development side of things. So that's where you build the homes to completion. On the right-hand side, you've got the longer-term investment phase. So in this case, you have a jointly held development company. Great Western Regional Capital is there trying to make this land deal happen, essentially, with whoever the landholder may be. You then have a housing association and or developer. Developer could be a community-led, community self-build developer. The land, in this case, council land, goes in, and that's then how you borrow the development finance. You produce the homes. Once the homes are completed, this is the trick. This assumes a housing association. The affordable homes, because you haven't had to pay for the land up front, we don't allocate the land cost to those affordable homes. So the price, the capital cost, in other words, of those affordable homes is only the cost of the labour to build them, the materials to build them, the finance costs, if you like, the interest. Therefore, that is relatively cheap to buy and can be as affordable as you can make it. So we're trying to, if we can, move away from the 80% of market rent definition of affordable homes and actually move it to as low as possible by removing the land from that section of the equation. So the question is, where does the land liability go? It goes up to the top half. So the market rental properties, where you have the, in inverted commas, squeezed middle, those tenancies are the ones that then pay for the finance and pay for the land ongoing, and that's where the liability sits. So it's kind of a social enterprise model. That's the social, that's the enterprise. And what's interesting in terms of the financing of it is that there are more and more socially minded investors who are interested in this long-term space. So people like Big Society Capital is an example, sort of quasi-governmental scheme. There are others, social investment business and other large trusts. And once you combine essentially a not-for-profit development model with long-term patient finance investors and long-term patient land investors, the thing starts to stack up, so we think. Risks and mitigations, these are the sorts of things that these are the barriers. This is why it hasn't been fast. This is why it's taken a long time. And I can't say we've won the argument yet. I think we're beginning to win the argument at more of a senior level. Development cost overruns, that's going to be the case in any scheme, regardless of the way you deal with the land, and it can be mitigated with the right partners. But I think that's one, for today to think about quite carefully. Who's on your board? What's the track record? Have they done it before? And therefore, is that going to provide assurance to anyone who might be funding a scheme that you might want to do? Failure to complete the homes, same comment. What's the track record? What's the experience? Rising interest rates, who knows? At the moment, we're in a sort of unprecedented low interest rate environment in terms of how long it's been, and for the moment it looks like it's going to continue like that, but you don't know what could happen. And that obviously, if interest rates go up, it makes it more difficult to pay for the finance. Legal and procurement issue, e.g. state aid. This I think, if there was one single biggest issue in this city at the moment, it's making sure that the Social Value Act, which is being considered from a procurement perspective, is factored into the conversations that you are having. In other words, if you have a legal department in an area where there is land to be considered, and you have a procurement department, my analogy is that the legal department, quite rightly, should always be in defence, but the procurement department should be in midfield, not in defence as well. In other words, the procurement should be enabled to be innovative and think about doing different things with innovative providers. At the moment, I think, if I was to comment, both legal and procurement are in defence at the moment. That might be why there's a bit of stickiness in progress. And then obviously, normal sorts of things that housing associations look at: voids, bad debts, repairs liabilities on existing properties. Those are all, in getting a scheme going, those are the sorts of things that the land investor or the money investor might look at. And as long as they're well managed and well understood, then that's not a problem, but they just need to be thought through. That was all I was going to say. Just to conclude, I think, as I say, that it is a model. I'm not saying it's the only model. I'm not saying it will work for everyone in this room, but it's just a model that I think, against some quite difficult policy constraints, could keep affordable housing being delivered. So that was it.